Zone 2 training only for 6 weeks. What has it done for me? 6 weeks ago, I went to a sports science lab. I did a step test and a ramp test to find out my fitness levels and my Zone 2. Since then, I have tried to train in Zone 2 and Zone 2 only. Not as easy as it sounds. It's meant that sometimes I haven't even broken a sweat. But has it made me any fitter? I'm heading back to the sports science lab to find out. So what have I been doing for the last 6 weeks? Training in Zone 2, of course, but if you are unfamiliar with what Zone 2 is, then make sure to head over and watch my first video where I explain what Zone 2 is and why I am doing this challenge. So I was coming from a period of not riding my bike very much, so the plan consisted of ramping up the hours throughout the weeks. And I think the shortest ride I did was 1 hour, and the longest ride I did was just over 3 hours. And the biggest week on the bike was a total of 9 hours. I did the majority, I'll say about 80% of my rides on the indoor trainer because I found it was so much easier to stick to Zone 2 on the indoor trainer, because turns out it is very hard to stick in Zone 2 when you head out to the real world and start riding up a hill. Thankfully, I had Coach Lawrence planning my training out, which helped massively. He even added some intervals into my training sessions, which really made it a lot easier than just sticking to one power throughout the whole thing. So essentially, I guess one of my training sessions might have looked something similar to this. So I'd have an hour and a half on the turbo, do a 10-minute warm-up, and then I'd do a 20-minute block right at the top of Zone 2. So the aim of the session was to hold my heart rate between 150 to 155 beats per minute, which is a 5-beat margin, which is quite hard. And then I'd have a 5-minute rest and then repeat that 3 or 4 times within a session. And that just mentally helped break up the time, and it felt a lot more manageable than just sitting on the turbo doing one power for an hour and a half. So, did I actually manage to stay in Zone 2 for all of my training? I caught up with Coach Lawrence to find out.
So I've taken all your rides from that you've uploaded and had a look at them and put them into these graphs here so we can visually see it a little bit. And what stands out is that you really have spent most of your time in Zone 2, which is good. That's the point of it. So if you look at heart rate, obviously we've got heart rate and power, but if you look at heart rate, half your training was in Zone 2, another 25% in Zone 1, and then quite a bit of time in what I class as a recovery zone. But that's just things like freewheeling or descending. It's going to happen when you start off. Obviously, your heart rate takes time to get up, at the end of other bits and bobs, set of junctions, all those bits. So a load of training in was in Zone 2, and at the bottom we can see then I've sort of put it below lactate threshold, and we'll see that on your results, and that's kind of the top of Zone 2. And almost 95% of the training there was in that zone. So absolutely heaps of time in that zone, which is what we're looking for.
I had quite a lot of people on Strava commenting and analysing my training and being like, oh, you've gone out, you're in Zone 3 for a few seconds here and there, and kind of pointing it out. Does it really matter that much if I went into Zone 3 for 20 seconds, 30 seconds here and there?
Yeah, absolutely not. There's no really hard line. Although we call it a Zone 2 and there's a power number that might be 2 watts different, the body doesn't work like that. It's a bit of a transition. You can spend time there and nothing too much happens. If you weren't just doing Zone 2 training, let's say you had a really big day of efforts planned for tomorrow, and today's ride you pressed on a bit too much and spent a load of time in Zone 3, that might tire you out for that hard ride. But even then, not for a few seconds. And if you think about going up a hill, if you think about...
It's pretty impossible to stay in Zone 2 going up a hill.
Exactly, you've got to keep moving. Going away from traffic lights, you've got to put a bit more power down, all those bits. So no, don't worry about that. It's just about the idea of it being a steady ride, something where you can go longer rather than harder.
I like to see it as quite a realistic, well, what I've done is quite realistic, because if anybody else was going out to do this, they'd have to go out of Zone 2 for a little bit. So that's how I'm looking at it anyway. I've had a few easy days leading up to my next lab testing, and I'm nervous, but I think I feel good. But at this moment in time, it's really hard to know whether my results are going to be better, because it literally just feels like I've been riding my bike. It doesn't feel like I've been training. I've not done any hard efforts. I've not reached my max. It's just a really weird position to be in. But I'm feeling positive. I'm really hoping they're going to be better, but there's only one way to find out. It's back to the lab we go, and this time I have Coach Lawrence to give me some extra motivation and encouragement, and of course, take me through my results. Right, we're back in the lab. I'd like to say it's nice to be back, but I'm a little bit scared. And I'm going to be doing exactly the same test as last time. But Lawrence, give us a run through of what exactly I'm going to be doing today.
Yeah, so Manon, you're going to start with the step test. So there'll be 4-minute stages where the power increases by 20 watts per stage. Just nice and gradually until you're above threshold. So getting towards a bit of a hard effort, but not quite there at max yet. Bit of a rest, and then you go into the ramp test. That'll be 1-minute stages, increasing by 15 watts a stage until you can't go anymore. That's the fun one.
That sounds quite hard. Not looking forward to that one, but I'll get a good warm up in. I think my legs are feeling good. But it's hard when I've not done any hard efforts. I've just been sitting at, 150 heart rate for the last 6 weeks. So it might be a shock of the system going out of that today, but we'll see.
So today what we're hoping to see is some changes in the blood lactate curve for Manon. So we'll hopefully see a higher power output for a given blood lactate concentration, and we'll see the curve shift. That would mean that the zone 2 power and intensity has increased as well as a consequence of the training. We might also see some changes to maximal oxygen uptake, or VO2 peak, and the power output there, and that will be in the ramp test. But more likely what we're hoping to see, what we expect to see is the bottom end changes, which is where Manon's done most of her training.
Any encouraging words for Manon?
I feel the pressure now.
The pressure now. Just keep pedaling.
Thanks, Lawrence. Thanks.
So when we're thinking about adaptations to training and responses, they can be quite different between those who have previously been elite athletes, like Manon here, and those who are just starting out. What we might see is that Manon actually adapts and responds really quickly compared to someone who's less trained, which sometimes we think about it being the other way, but actually our body can remember where it was before and adapt really quickly. So we might see some better responses from this test from Manon than we might do with someone just starting out.
Thought it was going to be full of dribble then. Oh, that went on a lot longer than last time, so I'm hoping that's a good sign. So some ramp tests coming up. I'm scared, but let's do this.
So coming up now is the ramp test. Last time Manon got up to 270 watts. She went about 20 watts further in the first part, so my guess now is 300 watts she'll get up to, hopefully. So Manon's currently at 240 watts, so she's got a little bit more to go, but she's doing really well. Go on, Manon! Plenty more in the tank now. Go on, Manon, up, up, up! Go with the change! Push, push, push! Every extra little bit counts! Let's go! That's it, Manon, well done, drive! Keep going! Gonna go up to the next level, you can go with it! Done, well done.
Yeah. Oh. I think they both hurt just as much. I feel like I could maybe go a little bit deeper in this one, like go into the hurt locker a bit more, but I mean, it still hurts. No matter what your fitness levels, it's pretty grim. So that's the testing done and dusted. Now it's time for Lawrence to analyse the data and let me know the results. Shall we get on to the results?
Results, right.
Okay. Is it better or worse?
So the good news is, Manon, it's moved on a lot.
That's really good.
Really good. Really good here. So I'll talk you through. So we'll look at the blood lactate curve first. So that was the first part of the step test.
Yeah.
Where you did 4-minute stages and a 20-watt increase. So we can see on here, we've got the blue line was last time, and the bottom one is for blood lactate, and the top line is heart rate. The red line is this time. So what we can see is last time there was never really a level bit of line, it just went up.
Straight away.
The blood lactate was just going up, and metabolism, metabolic profile, not really that strong. This time a lot better. You can see a nice flat line where you've got 2 stages there, which is really good. And then it's also a lot lower than before. Last time it went up to sort of 9 millimole, which is pretty high. This time it's peaked out significantly lower there, around about 6 millimole. So really good move on. And if we think about then we've got LT, lactate threshold, and lactate turn point on there. They've moved on by about 15%. So last time your lactate threshold was 140 watts, now it's about 160 watts. And that is the point at which you kind of want to, that's the top of zone 2, is around about that. So your zone 2 power has moved on by about 20 watts.
That's pretty good.
Which is a lot. So that's awesome, right? And then one of the reasons we looked at heart rate zones a minute ago is that your heart rate and your zones kind of stay the same.
Yeah.
So the fact you train to heart rate as well as power, if you just train to power, you'd have actually been training now 20 watts too low.
Yeah.
So you used heart rate in combination with power to understand that and see that, which is awesome.
Yeah. I'm actually really surprised with how much that has changed because 5.5, 6 weeks is not a long time. And plus when you're training at such a low, it felt like quite a low intensity, it's hard to get your head around how you're going to get fitter and better. Because in my head, to get fitter, you have to be going full gas all the time, which isn't necessarily the case, as we've proven.
And there's different mechanisms. For the low intensity adaptations, it's about the duration, not the intensity. So there's a minimum intensity, after which it's about how long you go for. Going harder doesn't actually lead to any more adaptation, any more signaling. When you're going hard, it's about how hard you go for. And that's the difference.
Yeah.
So when you're actually riding easy, getting the miles in, you don't need to go hard. You just need to ride so you can have a conversation, so you can keep talking and just go longer rather than harder.
And if I was to do a totally different program, maybe doing like lots of intervals or HIIT workout, what do you think the difference would be if I tested again, doing something completely different?
So on here, you had about a 15% increase in your lactate threshold and that sort of more metabolic peripheral adaptations. And your maximal oxygen uptake, your VO2 peak, only increased by about 7.5%, which is still pretty good. There's still a lot. I think if you would have done more of the top end stuff, I think we probably would have seen a bigger shift in that, a bigger shift in aerobic capacity. So maybe a bigger shift in your sort of 4 to 10 minute power output, and probably less of a shift in your thresholds.
Okay. Interesting.
I reckon.
Yeah. And going on now, I've done this zone 2 block. What would happen if I carried on doing it for another 6 weeks? Would I still see the same improvements?
I think you started from a level which wasn't the highest level.
It wasn't.
Compared to your past.
Thank you for pointing that out.
But you've got a really good block of training. I think it was sort of 33, 35 hours of training, which is awesome, around work doing that. If you were to continue it, you probably would see much smaller improvements. And now it'd be the time to go, okay, what next?
Yeah.
How do you overload and stress the body? So I think that's where you could either go longer, and if you had more time, actually extending out to doing more 3-4 hour rides, building up to 10 or 15 hours a week. That would probably move this on really well again.
Yeah.
If you haven't got that time, which most people don't with work, it's about then building in some efforts. So that'd be building in the midweek hard efforts to create that overload and keep driving the adaptations on.
So there we have it. Zone 2, it does actually work, in my case anyway. But a big thank you to Lawrence for helping me out with this video. It has been great to have him along. But I also want to know what you guys have learned from Zone 2. What are your experiences been? Have you benefited from it? Let me know down in that comments section below. And I'm also going to do a follow-up video of what I've learned from training in Zone 2 for the last 6 weeks, because there's been a lot of questions asking how I've managed boredom, if I've been training outside, if I've been doing it to power or heart rate. So I'm going to answer all of those in the next video. So I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you soon.